If you just look around today, it's a strange paradox. We have more access to information, to connectivity than ever before. We're just drowning in it.
Drowning in it, yeah.
And yet, so many of us feel more divided, more anxious, and I think lacking a real sense of meaning. It feels like we're fundamentally fractured. So, with all this so-called progress, why does it feel like the human operating system is just failing? What does all this mean for you?
Yeah, and that paradox you just hit on, that's really the mission of this deep dive. The source material we're looking at, it argues that the root of all this confusion, this exhaustion, it isn't moral or cultural.
Not even psychological.
Not in the way we usually think of it. The argument is that it's profoundly ontological. It's a deep confusion about what we fundamentally are. We've lost the map to ourselves, and, well, the goal here is to try and reconstruct that map.
Okay, a map to ourselves. So let's get right to that foundational structure of that, because the core idea here, it breaks pretty sharply with how we normally think, right? The whole body and mind thing.
The dualism, yeah, this is different. The source proposes a triadic foundation, three inseparable but very distinct dimensions of being.
The trichotomic foundation.
That's the term. It's body, soul, and spirit. And it's so important to get that these aren't just, nice metaphors. They're described as distinct planes of existence that have to interact in a very specific hierarchical way.
Okay, so let's pin those definitions down, starting with the one we all know, the body. This is pretty straightforward.
Right. It's the physical instrument. Our manifestation in time and space, subject to entropy, the instrument.
The instrument. Got it. Okay, next up is the soul. The source uses the term alma. What exactly is that?
So the soul, or alma, that's our rational, cognitive, conscious structure. It's the seat of your psychological life, your memory, your beliefs, all your interpretations. It's the engine that processes data.
So it's the interpreter, the conceptual workshop.
Exactly, the interpreter. And that brings us to the third part, the spirit, or espiritu. And this is really where most modern thinking just goes silent.
The origin.
The origin, the fundament, yes. It's the essential foundation, the source of pure intention, meaning, and our connection to essential truth. It comes before thought and emotion.
Okay, but hold on. I think the question you, the listener, are probably asking is,
Yeah.
how is that different from what psychology just calls the subconscious?
Yeah.
Isn't that also a deep, pre-rational space?
That's the immediate challenge, you're right. But they're fundamentally different. The subconscious, which is a part of the soul, it's a storage unit. It holds past experiences, learned behaviors, repressed stuff. It's reactive.
It's bills from our history.
Exactly. The spirit, on the other hand, is described as increated. It's proactive. It doesn't react to the past. It generates pure intention towards fundamental values like truth or goodness. It doesn't hold memories. It holds meaning. It's like a compass that always points north no matter how bad the storm is that the soul is going through.
So if I'm getting this right, the soul is the software running on the hardware of the body, but the spirit is the core operating system, the true ethical OS that the software should be listening to.
That's a perfect analogy. And for you listening, understanding this is key. Any chronic conflict, that persistent anxiety, that feeling of, not being yourself, the source says it comes directly from a disorder between these parts.
When the interpreter decides it wants to be the origin.
Exactly. When the software tries to rewrite the operating system.
Which is, I think, the aha moment in all of this. It gives us a model for how we act. It's called the unit of causal action. It describes the flow in an ordered human being.
And it's a very rigorous top-down sequence. Intention, concept, expression.
Okay, break that down. Intention comes first.
Yes. The intention is the first cause. It originates in the spirit. It's that pure orientation toward a value or a meaning.
And that hits the soul, which creates the concept.
Right. The soul, the interpreter, it translates that spiritual intention into a rational structure, an idea, a plan, a goal.
And finally, that plan is executed through the body as the expression, the physical act, the word spoken.
The word, the action, the thing you create. The body is always the final step. It can't initiate anything on its own.
Okay, hold on. I have to stop you there because that sounds completely backwards to me. Are you really saying an intention exists before I even have a thought or an emotion about it?
Yes, absolutely. The source is adamant about this order. You don't decide to seek truth. The intention to seek truth is your essence, and it comes from the spirit. Your soul then notices this orientation, this pull, and forms a concept about it, like, I should read that book, or I need to have an honest conversation.
Ah, okay. That clarifies it. It's the difference between a pure, foundational desire the intention,
Hmm.
and a specific plotted response, which is the concept. And this model, it immediately shows you where the conflict comes from. There's a great example in the source about the desire to love.
Oh, it's the perfect illustration of this fragmentation. So from the spirit, you have a pure intention, queer amar, to want to love, a desire for unity, for connection. It's immaculate.
But then it gets to the soul. And our souls, our interpreters, are often, well, they're a mess, right? They're full of past hurts, fear, pride. So how does that damage corrupt the pure intention?
It translates it poorly. The soul creates a flawed concept. Instead of conceptualizing, I will act with generosity, a fractured soul might think, I need to control this situation so I don't get hurt again, or I have to demand respect to prove my worth.
So the original intention to love is still there, deep down.
It's still there, but the translation is completely compromised by fear and past programming.
And then the expression, the action that comes out through the body, it isn't love at all. It might be manipulation or withdrawal or even a defensive attack.
And the tragedy, as the source points out, isn't in the spirit's intention. That was pure. The error is in the soul's flawed, fearful interpretation. It's a communication breakdown between the origin and the interpreter.
A communication breakdown. And this is where we can trace the problem back historically, right?
Yeah.
If this three-part structure is the real map, where did we lose a whole dimension?
Well, the source points a very direct finger at the 17th century.
And that's where someone like Descartes comes in, right? The big split.
Exactly. René Descartes. He splits reality into just two things. The thinking stuff, res cogitans, and the physical stuff, res extensa. And in that move, he just erases the distinct category of spirit.
So he collapses the spirit, the part that generates intention, and the soul, the part that interprets, into just one single thing he calls the mind.
And it was a catastrophe, because now the mind became judge and king. But that mind, the soul, is only a translator. It's not the origin of meaning. When you put the translator in charge of writing the original text, you get a closed loop. The system becomes self-referential and eventually completely meaningless.
That philosophical slip-up basically laid the groundwork for our entire modern anxiety.
It created what the source calls the historical disconnection. In a properly ordered person, the flow should be true-theming expression. But what we live in now is a total inversion of that.
The inverted order. And the sequence is sentir, pensar, aisir.
Feel, think, be.
Wow, that sequence, sentir, pensar, ser, that hits a little too close to home. Can you walk us through that?
So we start with sentir. We first react emotionally, instinctively. It's a gut reaction, fear, desire, cultural pressure. That comes first.
And then we use our minds, the pensar stage, but only to justify that feeling.
Precisely. The rational soul, which should be listening to the spirit, is now just a lawyer hired to defend the gut reaction. Reason becomes the servant of instinct.
And the final step is ser, to be. Our identity becomes defined by that reactive, justified narrative. We literally are the sum of our justified feelings. We're defining ourselves by the fracture.
And, seeing that, recognizing that we're constantly just justifying our gut reactions instead of acting from a stable core, that's the first step. But historically, this inversion led to, well, massive despair.
Which is where someone like Nietzsche comes into the picture.
Right. Nietzsche's genius was seeing this collapse with terrifying clarity. The death of sense, nihilism, he saw the disconnected soul in agony, but because he lacked the category of spirit, he looked for what was left.
And all he could see was the frantic energy.
The frantic psychological energy of the will to power, and he mistook that for the essence of humanity.
So he saw the house was on fire, but he mistook the screaming smoke alarm for the architect. He saw the wound, but he confused the symptom, the frantic impulse, with the cause.
That's a fantastic analogy. He diagnosed the vacuum perfectly. And then, the source argues, contemporary materialism just doubles down on this. It entrenches the inversion.
The reductionism, the idea that all of this intention, meaning spirit, is just processes, atoms, and electrical impulses.
It reduces the spirit to just brain chemistry. And so that deep anxiety we all feel, that sense of fragmentation, gets treated as a chemical malfunction. But the source insists it's ontological disconnection. We're trying to medicate the signal instead of restoring the order.
And the result of living like this, in this inverted state, is that the soul is just. It lives in profound vulnerability to suggestion.
Completely. If your identity isn't anchored in something permanent, like the spirit, then it has to be built from the outside in, from social roles, emotional reactions, cultural stories.
Which gives you an identity in fragments. Constantly shifting, totally unstable.
But there is a corrective mechanism built into the system. And that, thankfully, is suffering.
The source has a really radical take on pain.
It's not a punishment. It's not a sign of fragility. Suffering is an ontological signal. It's the subjective feeling of that quibra, that break in the internal order. It's the spirit sending a flare-up, trying to get the soul's attention. That low-grade anxiety you feel when you know you're not living right, that's not a defect. That's the alarm bell.
So if suffering is the alarm, what does the disconnected soul do to try and shut it off? This is where the substitutes come in.
The substitutes, yes. These are all the frantic things we do to fill the void. Constant stimuli, overworking, endless scrolling, rapid gratification.
Anything to block out the silence.
Because in the silence is where you might finally hear the quiet, stable voice of the spirit.
And the source makes a really critical distinction here, using the Spanish terms. It says the substitutes provide alivio, relief, but not paz, which is peace.
Yes, alivio is chemical, it's momentary, it's like putting a bandage on a compound fracture. It might hide the wound for a second, but the break is still there. Paz is structural. It's the quiet stability that comes when the whole internal system is aligned correctly.
So euphoria isn't happiness.
No, euphoria is just noise. It's a chemical spike that ultimately deepens the void because it has no connection to the spirit's stable truth.
So how do we escape that loop, the constant search for alivio? How do we get to restoration?
Well, the path to restoration isn't about more psychological effort. It's not about fighting your thoughts harder. It's actually much simpler. It is about reestablishing the original hierarchy, spirit, soul, body.
Just letting the soul recognize the spirit's authority again.
Exactly. When the interpreter starts listening to the origin again, the whole internal architecture just settles back into its natural state.
And what does that actually look like day to day?
It looks like coherence. Your will stops fighting itself. That internal civil war just stops. And your emotion, it ceases to be the governor and becomes a witness. It becomes an indicator, data that tells you, hey, that felt right or that caused friction, but it's no longer the one making the decisions.
You use your feelings as data, not as dictates.
Precisely.
And this restored order, it leads to what the source calls the ethics of the spirit, which it really changes how you think about being a good person.
It does. An ethical life, in this view, isn't about following a set of external rules because you're afraid of being punished. It is the natural expression of an ordered, integrated being. If the intention from the spirit is pure and the concept from the soul is clear, the action will just be good. Morality becomes coherence, not compliance.
As we start to wrap up here, the final chapters really push this whole structure beyond just our daily lives. They talk about something called ontological hope.
And this isn't hope-like optimism. It's not a positive feeling about the future. It's described as a structural property of the spirit itself.
No.
Because the spirit comes from the absolute, from the ultimate foundation of truth, it's inherently oriented toward meaning and continuity. It's not created, so it's not subject to decay.
So it's like a philosophical guarantee
Definitely.
against total annihilation, which is what the disconnected soul is terrified of.
That's it, exactly. And when the soul finally grasps this, that existential fear of suffering and death begins to dissolve, it allows you to act with real freedom, with serenity and courage, because your true identity isn't seen as fragile or temporary anymore. This is the praxis of hope.
And that leads us to the final, profound axiom of this whole work. The idea that ties it all together, the second birth.
Right. The physical birth, our first birth, gets us into the world, but it doesn't automatically connect the soul to the spirit.
That's the second step.
It's a conscious alignment. That moment where the soul recognizes and aligns with its spiritual origin, that is the second birth. And it's what ensures the soul's continuity. If the soul stays disconnected, just defined by its feelings and ideas, it risks dissipating when the body does.
Which leaves us with that final, chilling, but also incredibly liberating statement from the source. It's a challenge to you, to everyone listening, to integrate this now. Whoever's born once dies twice. Whoever's born twice dies only once.
It just underscores that this knowledge, this map, has implications far beyond our temporal life. The question it leaves us with is, what would your life actually look like if you lived it from this ordered state? If your intention, your concept, and your expression were all in perfect, coherent alignment.
A question that redefines not just philosophy, but every choice you're going to make today. Thank you for walking us through this essential architecture of the self.